Hi, everyone. Welcome to the MikeDrop podcast. Today's episode number 15, Excerpts. I am here today with the one and only Mike Compitello. Hi, Mike.
Hello. I'm looking forward to making an excerpt of this episode.
I thought it was fun that we titled the episode Excerpts, which is itself an excerpt of orchestral excerpts.
That's true. Very clever. I think our listener will get it.
We do have smart listeners.
But, time out.
Yes?
We have a merch update. Well, it's not really merch, right? It's more of like a nation state update, which is that you have acquired something behind you.
Yes.
Related to our ensemble. Can you show us?
I will get up very cautiously with the headphone cable. And
Can you make it with the cable? Oh, yes. Look at this. It's a flag. Yes.
It's a flag of our very logo from the one and only Sean Tilburg.
I love this.
It's about 5 feet by 5 feet.
Okay. It's yellow. It's bright yellow.
It's bright yellow. It's going to go up on the wall behind me. So stay tuned for that.
I love this.
And
I've received some comments, Mike, that we should have some merch that doesn't have us on it.
Well, what would be on it if it wasn't
I guess
us?
other people, perhaps, or
Okay.
Just the name MikeDrop.
Okay.
I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but
Okay, I have another idea. What if we do MikeDrop merch where the person who purchases the merch is on the flag?
I like that. Yeah, toasting. Yeah, I think that's great. Send us your photo, upload your photo, and then you could be
We will airbrush you in.
like that Seinfeld.
Yeah, where George is in the beach.
Oh man. So we got a lot to talk about today. Excerpts.
We do.
And there are a lot of resources about learning excerpts, like how to do it, which ones to learn. There's a lot of nuts and bolts here because it's a huge industry, right? Getting into orchestras or taking auditions for stuff where you have to play orchestral excerpts.
Gosh.
It's a huge industry.
Yeah.
So I got the sense that you would want to start by talking about why, or maybe what are they, or why learn them? What are you thinking?
Well, I think it's clear to me, at least, why somebody would want to learn excerpts, like as a general rule. It makes a lot of sense that somebody wants to play in an orchestra, and that's a job, and you see people up there, and you know that is a job that people have, and maybe it's the perfect thing for you. You love orchestral music, so you want to learn the excerpts in order to familiarize yourself with the material needed for the job. I think that there are many more reasons, but
let's talk about that. So just as another timeout for anybody who's curious, if you want to win a position in a symphony orchestra, the audition process is that you play excerpts or pieces of an orchestral work. So you play your part to a short section of an orchestral work. And you usually do many, many of these if you play percussion. Sometimes you'll play a solo piece too, but it's far more frequent that you play, the snare drum part from this section to this section of this piece. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about excerpts.
Yeah.
So what are some other reasons to learn them other than gainful permanent employment?
Well, I know you've studied a lot of orchestral excerpts. You've told me that you've even played orchestral excerpts for university teaching job interviews. I've seen other people do that also in my life. So did you ever think that you were going to be an orchestral musician as your profession?
For a time, actually, yeah, I really wanted to. I wanted to, and I was seriously taking auditions, but at some point, it dropped off my radar. But For a time, yeah, actually. But I think for the majority of people who are taking playing excerpts, perhaps not, or at least the people I went to school with. What about you? Were you going to be principal timpani of Bayerischer Rundfunk?
I wish. Yeah, I was the when I was in high school, I participated in the Wisconsin Youth Symphony Orchestra. Shout out to the
Nice.
WISO group, and the that was my big experience with performing music. It was so
Mm.
powerful for me to be a part of like an orchestra, and we had a pretty good music program at my high school, but these were very elite musicians that actually, I saw later in life
Oh
in
yeah.
professional settings. And they were we played really great rep. We had wonderful conductors that were affiliated with the university there. So of course, I think a lot of people are in my same boat, that that's really my viewpoint of what music was as a profession. So
Yeah, yeah, totally.
when I that's all you have, then you think, I want to be that.
Hmm.
I want to be that orchestral musician. So I think now that I've moved to a place in my life where I know that I'm going to be playing with orchestras only as a substitute,
Mm-hmm.
um, I am so glad that I had that passion, because it instilled a love of this music, which is like such a big part of like classical music history, right? It's the orchestral tradition.
Totally, totally. I think you hit two things that I was thinking about too. I had the same experience in Tucson Philharmonia Youth Orchestra.
Yes.
I did for I think 7 years, and yeah, it was amazing. That's you
Was
get to know
that
that music.
was that Tipio?
TPYO we called
Oh,
it,
TPYO.
and that inspired me to go to summer festivals and just get involved in this music, which I loved. So same thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think it just became a big part of my life. So I can't remember what the second thing was, but I totally agree.
It probably wasn't anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. So for me, learning orchestral excerpts was it's partially about like, maybe I can back up. I'll back up. So for me, I started my undergraduate education thinking that I was going to end up taking auditions for professional orchestras. By the time I've gone through those really formidable 4 years, I realized that there were so many other parts of percussion available that I wanted to explore those too.
Mm.
And I hadn't spent a lot of time really working on my refined orchestral playing. So by the time I got out of undergrad and I'd spent those 2 years off, and I decided that I want to go back to grad school, uh, one of the things that was really scary was that I had to play these orchestral excerpts that,
Wow.
maybe I was good at them as an undergraduate student in my little bubble,
Mm.
but as far as like nationally or internationally, comparing with other grad student applicants, I probably was in the bottom 5%. I don't know.
Mm.
I wasn't, I hadn't refined that craft.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and I ended up going to a really heavily orchestrally focused school for grad school. To
Mm.
fast forward a little bit, but the that decision was actually scary for me. To like,
Mm.
after I found out that I had been accepted into Juilliard, like the if I asked Dan Druckmann, the professor there, I asked him like, what's the balance? Like, am I able to study non-orchestral music, because I know that Dan is so well versed in so much, and he plays a
Yeah.
lot with like a new music group, and he's been a part of like, contemporary music for a long time and the recording scene. So
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm-hmm.
was really versatile. So I asked him like, what's my balance here? Am I going to be able to study with you and look at things that are not orchestral music? And he said yes, but I think the primary focus for us is going to be orchestral playing. And that's scary. It's scary
Mm.
for me to have to study
Mm.
this thing that I really haven't spent a lot of time on.
Mm.
But I ended up deciding that going into grad school, that for me, the point of grad school wasn't to do the thing that I'm good at, but to have experience on the things at which I'm the weakest.
Mm.
So I
That's
took
good
the
advice.
I took the
Yeah.
challenge, and I'm so
Nice.
glad I did that. Not to say that I'm this amazing orchestral player, and I'm going to go out and beat you all in all of the auditions. That's probably not going to happen. But at least I had the experience to strengthen those weaknesses.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
great. I have, listening to you say that, I have like a bigger critical question that I think
Oh
we could
no.
talk about later, which
Oh
is the
no.
sort of, in today's landscape, should studying excerpts occupy the same position of the pie if you're in school, right? I think for those of us that are around our age in school, an orchestra job was like the peak, the apex, right?
Sure.
This was a job that financially the best. These orchestras and organizations are so stable, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're in school, these large ensembles, these orchestras have probably the most weight, right? But it does seem as though things are changing, and our curriculum. We have an episode about curriculum, are ever expanding, right? And so, are excerpts, do they need to be such a major thing? I think my undergraduate education was the same, where I studied with somebody that people know as a marimba soloist and a chamber musician, but our lessons were very heavily focused on orchestral excerpts.
Okay.
Timpani, snare drum, all, I mean, more timpani than other things. And we had other teachers that were teaching excerpts too. And it was a big portion. The expectation was that you knew these excerpts. But my teachers were very careful to talk about the excerpts, yeah, as getting a job, of course, but also as a way to work on certain parts of your musical personality. So the big question I have is, are excerpts still the content that's necessary for doing that right now? But yeah, I think it was a big part of my educational journey, and
Mm.
I think if I had to do it again, knowing what I know about learning now, I would have done it differently in terms of how to handle learning excerpts. But that's just my
Oh,
too strongly held opinions.
so would you spend? I know this is kind of a surface question, but would you spend more time on excerpts yourself, if knowing what you know now?
I think I would spend less time
I see.
because in the intervening years, I had the opportunity to live in Europe, and then I also had the opportunity to study stuff about how we learn. And it does seem that there's a real strong linkage between separating your technical and your musical development and getting better. By
Yeah.
that I mean practicing a piece of music versus practicing your technique. And with excerpts, there's a tendency to, you know, conflate the two,
Hmm.
right? And I think if I had to do it again, I would take it. I would be a little less precious. For percussionists, our excerpts are quite short. Compared to other instruments,
Hmm.
some of them are more calisthenic, right? Like,
Yeah.
can you do this 10 times? And so I would almost take the approach that my peers and colleagues in Germany did, which was basically until very short before the audition, they would just be playing their instrument,
Yeah.
playing xylophone rags, playing scales, playing arpeggios. And then at a certain point, it's sort of like, all right, what's on the list? Because, let's be honest. I mean, you and I and chamber musicians and soloists, we're learning music that is significantly more difficult than that music. And the key challenge is precision and accuracy. And I guess I would say now that precision and accuracy can be really developed by, learning a lot of music, practicing in certain ways, and not necessarily the way that I was taught to play excerpts. So I
Oh.
think that you could swoop in at the end with your extreme musicianship and play precisely and accurately. I don't know. Do you think that's the case? Because for me, it was like an either or. Was it like this for you in school? Like either you were on this orchestral track, or you were doing this other thing. It's very hard time wise to combine the both. So if you were preparing for an audition, you probably weren't also doing X, Y, Z. I don't know. Did you find that to be your experience?
Definitely. Yeah. I really feel like there's a difference between the person who knows in their heart that they're going after this job versus the person who's learning the excerpts in service of something else.
Yeah.
I think that would be maybe the nice way of saying it. There's also people who studied the excerpts just because the teacher told them that they have to, and came in and tried to just sneak by and really didn't take it as the learning opportunity that it was. And I feel like that's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Because everything's a learning opportunity, not to get all like PBS special on it or something, but the learning opportunity of excerpts for me is exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's the ability to dive into something at its depths and understand the exactitude of performance on a small scale, and then you can apply that same level of focus and exactitude to a larger piece or your solo recital or something like that. Something that you know but didn't mention, I think, is the context idea. That with the addition, with the exception of a few pieces, your solo recital piece or something, a lot of the parts that we're learning are something in a context. And then if you're learning Bach G minor fugue, or if you're learning velocities or something, like, these pieces have context, and they should have this sound world that exists around them. Like, if you assign a student to learn a Keiko Abe piece, and if that student doesn't take the time to learn the context of what Miss Abe sounds like when she plays, and the history behind like this Japanese marimba playing style, I think it's a disservice to themselves that they don't take that initiative, even if you don't assign that.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing if you're learning Porgy and you don't learn Porgy and Bess xylophone excerpt, and you don't learn it with at least 3 different stickings just to see what it is. I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're not learning the context around what everybody's talking about, or at the very least, like, experiencing.
Yeah, for sure. I think, maybe the two of us, we learned some music. I don't think we were as rigorously intellectual until later, maybe. I don't know. But I learned stuff because my teacher told me to. Yeah. And we never really actually, my teacher, Bob, was really good about saying, here's why we're doing this. But the excerpts, yeah, of course you want to win a job or something. But they're also, like you said, it's a perfect playground or sandbox to learn about refinement, like incredible precision and accuracy, like incredible like nerve resilience, and then also just sort of how to study something. How you, like you said, how to study with something, and you said it before too with timpani. We were talking about timpani. It's your way to engage with the, for like it or not, the canon of Western classical music. These are the parts that you'll be playing. I think though that if you approach it from the mindset of, here's my way of developing color, here's my way of developing like how do I practice this thing so that I can do it 100 times exactly the way I want it.
Yeah.
There are kind of 2 general ways. One is to do it 1,000,000 times, and then the other is to do it 200 times in 200 different ways, and every time you're working on that, you're developing exercises from the music, you're sort of being creative with it.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to sort of say, like, how can I really do this? And then if you can do that, learning bar 5 of velocities, you could, like you said, apply those same techniques to it. And there's all these tips and tricks in learning excerpts because the material is so short. Like, here's how you can record yourself, here's how you can do this, here's how you can do that. But I do find that there's this, in the States at least, there's this tendency when we learn them to use that as an opportunity to narrow our musical focus instead of saying, I actually think that the way that the way to play something exactly the way you want it 100 times in a row is to be able to play it 1,000 different ways. Yeah. To be able to try different beating spots, different sticks, different tempos, different colors, different inflections. So that's sort of my take. And I do feel like I learned how to control myself for whatever degree I can control myself through playing excerpts. But do you think somebody in 2024 can learn those skills without those specific excerpts?
Um,
I know that's not the topic of our podcast.
I think it's a mindset.
Yeah.
And it's a mindset that requires a lot of self-discipline. And I think self-discipline is in a deficit at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think anyone can get that level of precision that you're talking about in the practice room with any material. You could do it with an etude book, or you could do it with Podemsky.
Yeah.
You can get anything that you want. It requires a certain level of self-accountability. The thing that none of these, like the non-orchestral excerpt music, the thing that the non-orchestral music has or doesn't have that's necessary is this external context.
Yes.
So you could learn any solo piece that you want, or you can learn something from Podemsky, but you can't understand what the greater service is of that part if there is no greater service.
I guess I would phrase that another way and say that it happens to us. I guess a side thing of that is that it's music that other people know.
Sure.
Like a clarinet player will know that section, perhaps. And so a lot of times for us, we play music that nobody's heard before.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity, to like when a cellist plays Bach, the people in the audience are probably going to know this piece. So we want to see your take on it.
And there's no hiding behind unfamiliarity or chromaticism or or the aura around percussion being this novelty instrument. It's just show up and own it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about competitions before, and I think it could be something similar. That like when you and Hannah were competing in the Chamber Music Concert Artists Guild competition, you're up against people playing like Haydn quartets.
Yeah, holy cow. Yeah, we're in trouble.
Right. So it's similar, but just with the same music.
And these auditions are more overtly competitive than most other circumstances that people will be in.
Yeah.
Like if they were sport, what sport would they be? There's no ball. The timer goes down. You do see the other competitors, but only one person is going at a time. I don't know.
Yeah. In what sport can you not make a sound, but you have to make sound?
Tennis.
Yeah.
As an audience member.
Right.
Well, I mean, shoes are really important.
Yep.
There's a lot of equipment. What other sport has a lot of equipment? Football probably has the most, right?
Yeah, those the with the trunks and the Surface, Microsoft Surface.
Pentathlon. Yeah, the Microsoft Surface. So I know that there's a whole world here.
Yeah.
But maybe we could offer some tips and tricks or thoughts, at least from people that are sort of inside and outside.
Yeah.
Or learning music that are not excerpts, about how to learn excerpts, because I bet you have some big picture ideas. When I talk about excerpts, especially with my students, some deep secret training emerges. The part of me that's the most rigid. Does this happen to you, where it's like, well, here's how you do it.
It's sometimes, yeah.
Here's the sticking that you use. Here's how you do it. You listen to 3 recordings. One is from an American orchestra. One's from a European orchestra. One's an old one, and then you do this, and then this is, and somehow something comes out. So tell us, Dr. T, what do you do? What's the method here? Because there's so many things that are perfect for you. There's so much preparation in this.
I will answer that, but I do think it's exciting for me as the observer of your most recent comment about how you become more rigid. That basically your entire soapbox speech from 5 minutes ago was...
Yes, it goes out the window. It goes out the window.
Like everything's gotta be flexible. But
but then as soon as the student comes in, like, oh no, you're starting with your right hand, friend.
That's not right.
It's crazy, right?
Go get the other snare drum.
Yeah. Nope, that's a 5-inch drum. Yeah, that's a Duff 2. Oh, I know, right? Okay, the contradictions are real.
That's so funny.
So I mean, okay, we got to talk preparation because excerpts are so prep based,
Yep.
right? So what's the preparation like here? You get a list, like you want to take an audition.
Okay.
You know the southern, southeastern Idaho Symphony Orchestra,
Yeah, it's a
and
good one.
they have the list.
Yep.
What do you do?
I think generally I'd pick a point as somewhere about maybe a month or so out, 6 weeks out, where, and it's just, I would do the same thing for a solo recital. You have to pick some kind of general point. It doesn't have to be an exact day, but something around this week that you have to make the PDFs. So you have to spend time tinkering, like you say. Like, what's the way that I can achieve the cleanest double in Scheherazade at this dynamic? What's the best way that I can achieve this soft tambourine playing? And there's a series of tinkerings that have to happen, and then at a certain point you have to decide that you're going to do it one way, and then practice it that one way. Maybe 6 weeks is too long or too short for some people, but something so that you give yourself enough time to feel comfortable to refine that technique, relax a little bit off of it, and then come back to it at some point. So that's kind of the general thought. I think the thing that helps me the most when I'm doing orchestral study is the idea that the frame around your excerpt matters so much. Like, if you, I have so many students that come up to me, and no direct names will be said to anybody, but I have students that come into the office for lessons, and almost like everybody at some point in the 4 years says, I play so much better in the practice room than I do up here. And
what is your office like really high off the ground or something?
I have it on one single pole.
Oh, it's really high, like Columbus Circle statue.
Yeah,
People are climbing up there.
Yeah, it's more of a treehouse than an office.
That sounds great, actually.
You have to.
Can I take my lessons?
Swing into it? Yeah.
Wow, nice.
But like when somebody comes in, or some people say, hey, I play so much better in the practice room than I do on stage, or whatever, and like that makes a ton of sense. I think Don Green would have a lot of thoughts for you, but the like part of that is that when the method that you practice, you're practicing something in a flow, and when you perform in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So when you're practicing, if you're not practicing in that vacuum with the frame around your excerpt, then you're really practicing a different piece almost.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is the difference between practicing and then practicing performing.
Yeah.
And I was reading about this idea of contextual interference. Sort of this making things difficult for yourself. And an example like the excerpt is a free throw. Maybe we've talked about this before, where in a basketball game, you shoot one after doing nothing before. But when you're practicing, maybe I'm getting like 50 of these in a row. It's the same with the excerpt. So there's a difference between practicing to learn the excerpt and then practicing to deploy them.
Yeah.
And the unusual thing about deploying excerpts is that you don't choose what order you play them in. It's like learning Hamlet, and then you get to the stage and someone's like, let's start with Act 3, Scene 2.
Thanks.
And you're like, what the?
Which one is that?
So, yeah. Am I dead yet?
Yeah, who's dead?
Who's dead? Is Polonius dead? Yeah. I think that's interesting. What shocks me is that you didn't talk about something that would be so in character for you, which is getting all the stuff together. Like getting all the music, putting it in something like a binder, organizing it, making a plan for your learning, like a chart for your learning. Are those things that you would recommend doing? And of course, we could do a whole episode about how we store our music digitally,
Sure.
physically, what size paper you use and stuff. And there's a whole cottage industry for this. But
Yeah.
but what about the preparation? So I think I would think you got to get all the music,
Of course.
and then you got to organize it in some way. Do you got any tips and tricks for this?
Well, that's basically it. Is like you nailed me right on it. Yeah.
Yeah, where were you, man? I was looking for like a basic question, like what is an excerpt?
Right. But that's I mean I definitely feel that way, and it's nice to have as many resources as you can. I have a pile of books sitting next to me just in case you called my bluff.
I have a filing cabinet full of excerpts right now. I was ready too. The knives have been sharpened, just in case he mentioned something.
Yeah, right.
Reach over.
Should we do like a quick draw, like Alexander Hamilton Burr duel?
Yeah.
Like, okay, show me Tafoya Timpani Survival Guide. You know?
Yeah, I've got it. Do you have the glockenspiel part to Alexander Nevsky?
Yeah, because I mean that's something that any music publisher would be very upset about this. But there are photocopies of everything, and somebody's got it. You can also order them from publishers too. If I think that was like the one of the expensive methods back in the day. In addition to going to the score and handwriting out the excerpt.
You mentioned that in a previous episode.
That's happened before.
Pro tip: listen to that episode.
Yeah, whichever episode it was.
This is funny. I listened to a podcast from that show 99% Invisible, and it was about the real book. The history of the real book.
No kidding.
And the real book was based on this thing called a fake book, which is that, after World War II, all these musicians had gigs and stuff, and they didn't know all the tunes, and so they would print these basically little fragments of the song.
Yeah.
But then eventually those songs became super out of date. So these two anonymous Berkeley students, made a book that wasn't just full of fake tunes, but it's full of real tunes.
Yeah.
It's horrendously illegal.
Yeah.
Because it's got all of the songs in it. So there is an element of this, but there's also like a rental element. Like if you rent Steve Reich's Sextet, they give it to you with like 3 weeks.
Yep.
Right? Are you really going to learn the piece in 3 weeks? And same with the excerpts. Yeah. If you get them too late, this is a type of learning that really privileges people that are good planners.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And archivists and librarians. So yeah, I think that's great. But also it's kind of important to know where to find things. Like, okay, here's the trivia. Where is Porgy and Bess available?
Goldenberg book.
And
oh, it's in the Orchestra Probespiel book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in Probespiel.
Yeah. Look at us.
So like I think just knowing that and knowing where to find these things, and now excerpts, there's so many more excerpts that are being asked now, just based on things that were written for different people or different people have had to play in the past. Like since we were in undergrad, like Escapades is now part of the canon.
It's big, yeah.
And that's a part that's really difficult to find. But honestly, like you can find parts anywhere. Just
I think that's a whole other category. Like what are the books? Because there are some books that are just the part, and then some people have made books where there's also they've given performance instructions.
Yeah.
Or they've given suggestions about stickings or about recordings. An example of that would be the Randy Max timpani book, where he gives a number of different recordings and their tempi, and then he gives some suggestions. An extreme example would be the Hinger books, timpani books, in which he sort of goes page by page. I tried this with my left hand, or like I put this on the 26-inch drum, and the suggestions are usually like pretty out there in terms of suggestions. Don't maybe? Do you think so? Sort of like this guy has a crazy uncle vibe.
Yeah, but I think that part of it is good that the information, the really pinpointed.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
Information is also available so that you know that there isn't, as I used to think, there isn't one way to do this. There isn't a secret handshake that everyone is looking for, and all you have to do is like pay somebody for a lesson, or you have to somehow go to the right school, and you're going to achieve access to the information, capital The.
Yeah,
It's
for
not that
sure.
way. It's I think it's that way in certain silos. Like if you want to
Yeah.
audition, like the big jobs that were open this year, Boston Symphony was open this year,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and Cleveland was open this year. There's also like more great jobs available all over the place,
Mm.
and yeah, there's certain. It's like you have to do a scouting report on these orchestras,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be playing, and whether they want you to fit into something that's pre-existing.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Not to say
Like
you have,
you can't win a job in Concertgebouw sounding a certain way.
or anywhere, right? I mean, there's like certain ways that you have to play, and I know when you audition at Vienna, like you have to play on their gear because that's what you're
Yeah.
going to be playing on, right? And I think that a lot of orchestras will ask you to maybe play on their cymbals, or like Concertgebouw is a good
Mm-hmm.
example because they only use one triangle.
Yeah.
And so if you go in there, I don't know this for a fact, but if you go in there and you bring your own triangle, is that really showing them what you're going to actually be like in the job?
True. True.
So I don't know how those folks do it. That's my favorite orchestra. So
Well, very few fighter pilots are bringing their own planes. Well, I want to circle back to something you said earlier because it implies that there's almost like a two-phase or three-phase process. There's the process of gathering all the stuff,
Sure.
learning the notes, making a kind of a list of the techniques you need to develop in order to learn these excerpts, and also just like the grunt work of learning the notes.
Yep.
And then at a certain point, you sort of establish your game plan for each of these excerpts.
Yeah.
And then the challenge becomes consistency and vitality of that game plan.
Yeah.
So even I would always put like a couple character words to sort of get your pre-flight thing happening before you play the excerpt. So there's another phase where you're sort of like, this is how I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that to the best of my ability, whether it's cold runs, whether it's doing micro-targeted practice sessions, whether it's practicing making myself nervous in a bunch of different ways.
Yes.
So there's that. And then there's the sort of deployment in a situation. So like, for example, at an orchestra audition, there are different rounds. And the sort of, I think that the skills needed to win in each of those rounds is pretty different.
Yeah.
The first round, there's a lot of people. Everybody's playing the same thing. Seems like you just don't want to mess up, or you don't want to stand out in a good or bad way. And then the next rounds, there's fewer people. Maybe now is a little bit. The last round, maybe you wear dope pants or something. And so I think then there's like a situational deployment, or maybe this excerpt is something you're playing right after you played Velocities. So maybe that it has a different function. Would you agree, based on what you said earlier, that there's sort of these phases?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for saying the gathering information.
I just assumed you would want to talk about that because I have my own hunting and gathering strategies, but yours are always, they're sort of like 1800s based methods.
Well, first you have to chisel it into stone.
Yeah, I drove my horse
Yeah.
to Boozy and Hawks and requested a vellum of
Yeah.
the Schumann symphonies.
And well, the good
Yeah.
news is that Brahms hadn't written his first symphony at this point.
Yeah, so the repertoire was much smaller.
Yeah, I was playing Christmas Oratorio. Assorted madrigals. Yeah, I love that. I love the different stages, and there has to be a certain place or a certain point when you bite the bullet and you start doing the mock auditions for people and playing on foreign gear. And a lot of times orchestras will be able to tell you model numbers of instruments.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
you'll know if you're playing on like a Deegan 870 for the xylophone, or if you're playing on an artist special, or if you're playing, if whatever it is, so that you'll be able to prepare, and you could probably like go around and find somewhere close to you that has something with a bar spacing that's somewhat close. But yeah,
I have a question for you.
I'm ready.
Do you think this could be something we disagree about?
Sure.
My take
Is
I'm a
that the question?
very no, yeah, yes. Okay, yeah. No, I'm a very OCD person and very rigid, and I get scared when things are different. So
Yeah.
my strategy has been to always be ready to play on a different thing, a
Sure.
different instrument. So to be prepared in such a way that it doesn't matter what kind of marimba is there.
Right.
And so there would you be the kind of person that's like, the xylophone at the audition is this, therefore I will only practice on this, which you seem to imply in a previous episode? Or
Okay.
would you be the kind of person that's like, I'm ready, I'll play anything. I'll play like a Genko xylophone. I'll be great on all of them.
That's more my style. But if I know what the instrument is, I'm gonna want to make sure I can find that instrument somewhere, so that I know what the issues are. Like for me, the undergrad, I was going to a school where I knew I was going to be playing on a Malatech marimba, so I like hunted near and far to try to find a Malatech marimba that I could practice on for a couple times, so that at least I
Yeah,
knew what I was getting into.
it's tough. I hope you didn't play anything with octaves.
I did. I
Was
don't
the
know.
piece called like Study in Octaves number 2?
Shoot.
Like Study in Tenths? My Rachmaninoff transcription.
I knew I should have chosen a different piece.
Sorry. I mean, of course, with percussion, there are huge variances between things that impact your choice of mallets. And we're in a world where we generally, the kind of music we play, we have a lot of notes,
Right.
and so like, oh, I'll just change mallets. But in orchestral auditions, you basically have to get it right exactly
Yeah.
the first time. So I understand having a way,
Yeah.
but I think you're right. There's a certain point. There's like a you gotta get specific with it.
Yeah. And the
Well,
being flexible with time too. Like
oh yeah,
if you say, okay, it says on my piece of paper that my audition is at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to go through my routine, and I'm going to get up at 6, and I'm going to go for a little jog, and then I'm going to eat this food. And then, if you micromanage your time to be this super repeated, inflexible
yeah,
schedule, what's probably going to happen on the audition, I can't guarantee, but what probably is going to happen is that you're going to get up at 6, you're going to do your jog, you're going to eat your food, you're going to go warm up, and you play this thing in this order, and everything feels really great. And then it gets to be 10 o'clock, and they say, we're really sorry, the judges haven't shown up yet. Can you just wait around for a little bit? And then you're going to end up playing at noon or 2 or an hour earlier because they've had somebody drop out. I mean, you could get... They tell you on the sheet that you're going to get 15 minutes of warm-up time. You could get 1 minute. There's a ton of things that you don't want somebody else to be in charge of throwing you off.
yeah. I could imagine you being really vexed or flummoxed in these kind of situations, because it also puts you in you basically have to engage with the people you're competing against too. You're all sitting in generally a single room. It's kind of gladiatorial,
Yeah.
right? Like you imagine there are lions in some other room,
Yeah.
and then you're all in some room together.
And you bring
Yeah,
your
and
implements with you.
I can't imagine, there's ever an audition that I've ever played at that's been on time in a certain way.
So I think, I love what you're saying about flexibility, like training for the flexible nature of the audition.
It just reminds me of like a metric we used to use. I'm sure you use something similar, where my teachers would make us organize in our learning, kind of 3 tiers of the excerpts. The A tier is sort of, I could call you at 2 a.m. and you could probably play this.
Sure.
Right. And then the B tier is sort of, I know it, give me a sec.
Yeah.
It's in there. And 3 is sort of, I've never done this before. But I do think there's an element of being flexible. Speaking of being flexible on time, we set a timer for ourselves.
We did.
And the timer is up. Did we do anything useful today?
I'm not
I
sure.
mean, I feel like there's a lot we could talk about that's really specific.
Yep.
Tips and tricks. Like, here's how you can listen to recordings. Listen to a recording with a score. Listen to it with a part. Marking your part. All that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's stuff that I think there are a lot of resources about. But I am happy we talked about how do they fit in a balanced diet, the excerpts. What are we missing though?
I don't think very much. I think if I had to leave the listening public with one thought, it's that if you think that you're going to go in full on and be an orchestral musician, then go for it. That's super awesome. If you feel like that excerpts are not for you, if you're on the other extreme and you think that they are just a waste because you're never going to play in an orchestra, I would ask you to reconsider, because the excerpts are a vehicle to help you refine yourself in a way that's very difficult in other situations. And as we found today with Mike and me probably too, is that it gets a different side of your teacher. So you get a different kind of teaching. So I hope that even if your teacher doesn't have orchestral excerpts in the curriculum, you at least ask them. You bring in Scheherazade and Porgy and Kolas and Lieutenant Kiji and Beethoven 9 or something at some point.
You will get a lot more information from your teacher than by doing other stuff. Like there'll be a lot more information, and then there will be a lot more targeted criticism. I think, a certain type of teacher. I think we're the same. Where if someone comes in with Scheherazade, we're going note by note. Like the third one of those is early. The fourth one of those is late. The color of that note. You're gonna, like you said, you're just gonna get a hyped up version of your teacher.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, so here I had a question for you that's off the cuff, and I understand this is off the cuff, and it's difficult.
I'm not wearing cuffs, so.
Mine have cuffs. My hoodie.
Oh, I
has
guess
cuffs.
mine do too. And just shout out to our merch. Mike T ordered long sleeve MikeDrop shirts that have no cuffs.
That's right.
I have one.
Nice. They are not yellow.
They're not yellow. So if you don't like yellow, then
maybe we should start the MikeDrop store.
The MikeDrop store.
Yeah, with your face instead of ours.
Yeah, pick your face. Pick your two friends.
Okay, here's the question off the cuff.
Yeah.
Is there anything that comes to mind right now that's like your favorite recording of some excerpt? Like whatever excerpt, you've got a favorite recording of that you could share with everyone.
I think End of Rite of Spring, Cleveland Orchestra, Pierre Boulez is one of my favorites. Yeah, Cleveland Orchestra with Zell Beethoven symphonies.
Oh, those are magical.
For Mr. Duff's rhythmic placement. This is one out of left field, but Berlin Phil recording of with Boulez, Bartok's Second Piano Concerto, the bass drum part. Oh. That sticks out to me as just sort of, that is the greatest bass drum sound I've ever heard. What about you? I'm sure I'm gonna have some once you.
I don't have a ton ready to go. I love those recordings. That's great because I feel like everything is so its own that I don't have a ton of super opinions. But there is a recording that just came out maybe a handful of years ago of Boston playing Shostakovich 11.
Wow.
With Matt McKay on the snare drum. Shout out to Matt McKay. And
it's good.
It really threw me for a loop. Like I didn't think it was really that possible to sound like that.
Wow.
So that was a shocker for me, but I love your thoughts. Do you have a Scheherazade recording that you really enjoy?
Not really, because the last time I seriously studied Scheherazade was a long time ago, so I haven't been keeping up with recordings. How about you? Is there one where somebody absolutely crushes it, or the percussion section is really out of control?
I'm a New York person. New York studied in my professional life, so I have a soft spot for New York Phil with Mr. Lamb playing the snare drum. I'm gonna guess it's Mr. Druckmann playing the tambourine, but I'm not totally sure. Somebody could correct me on that. But it's just, it's fun when there's a group of people that know a piece really well.
Oh, for sure.
Playing at their
definitely.
best.
Yeah, I've had some epiphany excerpts. I think the first time I heard concertgebouw was a recording of Beethoven's Seventh Symphony,
Mars
and I remember
Janssens?
being like, yeah, and I was like, what is up with the timpani? And it sent me on this spiral, and I got extremely obsessed with this tympanistic approach. So I remember
Wow.
that. And I remember these. These aren't necessarily excerpts. A recording of Vienna playing Mahler's Sixth Symphony, and it's same with the timpani. I was like, what is that timpani sound?
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Those oblong
These
drums with the
yeah, and with the goat heads and
goat
the no
heads.
pedals. So that really kind of threw me for a loop. But those aren't necessarily excerpts, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. It's a unique thing, but I think that maybe goes to the point of when you're going to audition for an orchestra. If you know this recorded history of what these instruments sound like, what this
That's
orchestra
true.
sounds like because I think that's just how Vienna sounds. It's not like this day with this person, and I'm going to come in with
No.
my
Yeah.
you know Cloyd Duff technique
And
and
I don't
sound.
think I think that conductors with certain orchestras have relatively little impact on the sound.
Yeah.
With Berlin Phil, you're not, or with Vienna Phil, you're not going to change how that orchestra sounds in 3 days of rehearsal, I think.
Not sound. Yeah.
No, they're there to do that.
Yeah.
And you could change some things, but the level of pushback, I'm sure, would be pretty nuts.
But do you
So.
want to? You want to change this thing that's been great
Well,
for
it's also
centuries?
the personality type. So I might get in hot water with this, but not everybody has the ideal temperament for every type of musical job, right? And it's not a statement indicting skill.
Yeah.
Like, could you play as a session musician in LA? Like perfection sight reading. Some people are really great at doing that, and some people it just makes you really nervous. Could you play, a solo recital at town hall? Some people could. Some people it would make them really nervous.
Yeah.
And when the type of person that plays in an orchestra is, of course, a super curious, inquisitive person, but they're a little bit more set. Like, this is how I'm going to do it because it has to work. Instead of, I was thinking about that playing with an orchestra last week. In chamber music, there's a lot of, well, why don't we try it this way? Why don't we try it this way? And in orchestras, there's just no time. So a certain type of person who's like, this is what we're going to do. And then if you ask me to change it, I'll change it. But there's a decisiveness there that if the locks are undone on everything, you could probably never rehearse if every instrument was also sort of changing 100% what they're doing. So I think there's a reason for it, not to be too loud about it. But
I don't know the answer to this, so apologies. You might know better, but there's something about having a conductor in an orchestra that there's this built-in power dynamic that's very important.
yes.
That I kind of grew up in a pedigree where I'm not going to be talking to the conductor in the rehearsal.
Yes. You don't talk to the conductor.
It doesn't. But there's a lot of people who I've worked with, even in professional settings, where they have conversations with a conductor in the rehearsal, and I'm sure that's very productive for a lot of people. I don't maybe have enough experience or something, but I felt like the power dynamic was basically one way, unless like we have to throw the emergency chute for something, like we don't have that instrument.
Yeah,
or something.
and I think from the conductor side too, I'm sure most conductors are really interested in having a chamber music-like experience, but it's far more productive to say, let's do it this way. And then you don't even need to explain why, the interpreted reason why, but that's it. Versus, oh, could we try where you're doing this and then I'm doing this? That's great, but and that puts you, like you said, into a power dynamic and into just a mindset of who's running this rehearsal, and then what's my role in this rehearsal. So my role must be to absolutely crush my part then. I'm not offering suggestions about, what's the order of the concert, but
what are we gonna wear?
But yeah, what are we wearing?
What are we wearing?
Hey, can I recommend blue?
Yeah, I didn't bring a black shirt with me. Can we wear something else?
I don't have a belt. I think as percussionists, we're the most able to forget a critical item of clothing.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's seen my shoes in years.
Yeah, I've
Playing
never
it.
owned a pair of tuxedo pants.
Yeah, no, nobody can tell.
Zero pair.
Yeah. Timpanis have it the best. They probably don't need pants.
Uh, no, no. I think there's a
No.
lot of swim trunks back there.
What about a swim trunk that's like tuxedo to the knee, and then it just stops?
Like a concert capri.
Concert capri. You still got the dress socks. I'm into that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Or you just wear one of those T-shirts with the tuxedo on it.
yeah. With the like black patina or black patent leather boat shoes.
Oh, there was a phase when I was in college where Crocs came out with a black one.
Yeah,
So are Crocs concert shoes?
I think they are for some folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Interesting.
it's so interesting that you brought up this personality type. That's one of my bullet points that I thought wasn't going to be talked about today.
Oh,
That, is there a certain personality type that gravitates
definitely.
towards orchestral playing?
Definitely. Well, there's definitely a type of person who wins auditions more frequently.
Yeah.
They tend to be people that are extremely accurate, extremely precise, a little bit more on the ice-blooded side.
Yeah.
Very repeatable, perhaps slightly less inquisitive in terms of like maybe that what you and I would do, which is like, where was Brahms born?
Yeah. And then we spend 3 hours of our practice
Yeah.
time like
What did a triangle look like in 1840? Yeah. And I think that there is a type, and then people in who play in orchestras, they generally have a sound that's strong, it's clear. They're very enunciative. They're generally trying to sound good from an extreme distance. They have a kind of a set arsenal of things generally that they'll use that's maybe smaller than what somebody else might use.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that resonate for you?
it's interesting. Yeah, I'd be curious about that. And like the does an alpha personality usually win in these higher pressure situations? And I'm sure there's exceptions all over the place. I'm sure there's a million exceptions, but is that because you're talking about somebody who's organized and decisive and that is kind of leaning towards an alpha personality as I know it. So is that, not to say if there's somebody who doesn't have that, you should just give up and whatever, go do something else. But I think it's
Well,
it's interesting.
you can be that way sonically. My colleague here at ASU, Matt Prendergast, was doing one of our technique classes once, and he said something like, if you have good time and sound good, people will gravitate towards your pulse. It doesn't matter how loud you play.
Yeah.
It's just sort of, if I'll do with that. So I think you can sonically embody those things, because even though there's a power dynamic in an orchestra, there are still middle managers in this ensemble. You know what I mean? If they're still,
But maybe something you made me think about, like there are different roles traditionally in the orchestra for, let's say, first, second, third, fourth horn.
Yes, exactly.
So somebody who's like, has a perfect personality type for that fourth horn part, in the way that traditionally it's written. And I know composers, like that's part of what they study when they write for the orchestra is like,
That's right.
what
Yeah.
part do you give to which? It's not just high to low all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. I think it's the same for percussionists. I mean, even with like the principle, even something like assigning parts, knowing, okay, Mike T should play that part.
It's tough.
Or picking extras. Like, oh, there's a big conga part. That person should do it.
Yeah.
And there's a certain element with the principle where you are like, you're going from rampart to rampart, honor bound to play the most difficult part, no matter what instrument it is.
Yeah.
Which no other instrument does. Like, I'm playing flute no matter what in this concert.
I bet some people, I think, have in their contracts things like that. Like you can,
exactly.
negotiate.
Yeah.
But something like Boston Symphony's setup, right, where they don't have principals. It really depends on the group and the history of that group for sure. Especially if you walk into something and you maybe know the ensemble, but you didn't know the intersection politics of it, or
Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
like the skills of the different people. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of spend your first year, which is your tenure year, which is terrible, but you spend that first year trying to get your bearings of, okay, this is how it's been done forever.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I've heard from friends who get jobs in orchestras, and they come in and they say, it's so strange, like we have this amazing tam tam back here, let's use that. And then you show up and it's a no no no. Because you don't realize that actually we tried that tam tam 30 years ago, and
Yeah. It
in
didn't
the
work.
hall,
Yeah. Yeah.
like up close it sounds amazing, but in the hall it's not, it doesn't work, or that conductor really doesn't like that symbol or whatever. I
No,
mean,
no. I also, but when you play in an orchestra, the implications of you changing something are much. They trickle much more. If we're
yeah,
playing a duo and I say, oh, I want a different woodblock, I just go like,
yeah,
But in an orchestra, if I choose a different tam tam, then somebody's moving that tam tam, and then I have to tell you to play a different tam tam,
yep,
and then that might impact. There's a lot of there are a lot more structures, but I think principal percussionists tend to also be little personnel managers
yeah,
of their section, right?
yeah,
But they're saying like, oh, Mike T, he's really good at bass drum, but this concert, I think he needs to play that triangle part because he would just bring this pizzazz to it, or something like that.
sure. Or
Uh,
that, it's the repeated eighth notes on the triangle, and we want somebody who, this person's played a lot of like drum set gigs on Broadway, and they're going to bring
yeah,
a certain time feel to it. There's definitely some of that. But
yeah,
there's
yeah.
also the element in my own experience of, there was one time I was asked to play with the New York City Ballet after the show had started,
Oh no.
because they realized that one of the players was stuck in traffic, but they didn't realize it until the 2 o'clock matinee had started. So I got a call at 2:04 or something that said, "Are you nearby? Can you be here right now?" And
Wow.
so I ran into the pit of the New York City Ballet in the middle of this piece. And what they
Wow.
did, as soon as I came in the stage door, the percussion entrance, is that everybody rotated one part over in the middle of the piece. So there was there was a part that wasn't being played, so everybody tried to cover and scramble until I got there, and then
Holy
the
cow.
bass drum player like pointed at the music and said 3, 2, 1, handed me the mallet, and then I played, and then everybody shifted back over to a different part than they had been playing earlier.
What?
And I think that happens sometimes where, if you're being asked to do something and you have to come in at the last minute, we're going to
Yeah.
give you the part that will hurt the least if you mess it up, and
Exactly.
not the
Yeah.
part of the person who's out.
Yeah, totally, totally.
So you have, if
Um,
you do that, then there's a certain element of, you use this mallet on this measure and you play right there on the tam tam, and you play it with this amount of velocity, and then you use this mallet on this cymbal. And
yeah.
if you can construct something like that, it's really clear for people to walk in and have
Yeah.
a easy entry.
Yeah, totally. Whereas, in like a chamber music situation, you might choose somebody to play based on what they're going to bring.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this person's going to really bring this kind of energy. But then sometimes in an orchestra, you choose people based on what they're not going to bring. Like this person's very undramatic.
Yep.
They will take instruction well. They blend in, or they'll be able to do this. So I do agree. They're totally agree, and it's especially noticeable with these outlier things.
Yeah.
Like drum set in an orchestra is its own thing,
Oh gosh.
right?
Yeah.
Who can play drum set in an orchestra?
Yeah. You talk about the war on the metronome.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine being a drum set player playing. I mean, even West Side Story, like, some part that like has some sort of like repeated rhythmic like bass to it. Like,
Yeah,
can you
totally.
imagine like being
Oh,
trying to get that line of like making the group sound, but not being a jerk with the time? Like if you're a big band drummer, like
yeah.
Buddy Rich in an orchestra, that would
Oh my
not
God,
work.
he would go crazy. Crazier.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like since we decided our timer was going to go off, we have gotten increasingly possibly more offensive to people. In
Okay,
terms of,
let's do that.
no,
Well,
I'm just kidding.
you mentioned last time that we could have a little break in the middle for like, here's an ad from Bosco chocolate syrup or whatever. But you could have, maybe we could do something where at the end we just try to offend people.
Yes, we could do that.
We just move the break to the end and we say, okay, anybody who doesn't want to be musically offended, just you could leave. We could try that.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Just like our telethon.
Yeah, just us being here sometimes offends people.
Yeah.
Well, I thought
I'm sure it does.
This was enlightening to me. Thanks, Mike. Thanks
Oh,
for
it
those
was
thoughts.
super fun. This is great. I learned so much.
Yeah,
as
same
always.
Here. All right.
Yeah.
Well, everybody who's out there, this episode is available wherever you get your podcasts, but it's also available on YouTube at the MikeDrop Duo channel. Look for the yellow logo there, and hit us a subscribe so that you know when these next episodes are coming out. We'll try to have new episodes for you roughly every week as much as we can, but stay tuned. Stay tuned for more exciting things from the MikeDrop Duo.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everybody.